Our next panel is Hyperscaling with Tech, which would be apologies, a playbook on scaling by leveraging technologies from some of the finest minds in tech. So will you please join me in welcoming on stage Harmeen Mehta, the Global CIO and Head Cloud and Security Business for Bharti Airtel, Akash Saxena, Head of Technology for Disney Plus Hotstar, Kailash Nadh, CTO of Zerodha, Saurabh Tandon, VP Engineering, Flipkart FinTech and Payments, and the panel will be moderated by Raju Shetty, the Head of Engineering for Razorpay.
Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to FTX 2020. I'm super excited to host today's session on hyperscaling with tech. The Indian digital ecosystem has seen rapid progress and technological innovations the past decade. And this has enabled companies to scale and acquire customers at levels never seen before. I'm sure the audience must be following the previous discussions on disruptions in the fintech space and the rate at which the growth leaving a little doubt on how tech has been enabled in terms of being in the forefront of this change. And I'm extremely fortunate to have this panel. Let me welcome Akash, Saurabh, and Harmeen and Kailash will be joining very, very soon. Thank you for being part of the panel to share your views and approach with everyone. Since the other two are not there, let me start with you, Akash.
Sure.
I would like to start by asking Akash on how Hotstar is scaling massively over the last couple of years, and especially during the IPL season. Hotstar regularly gets millions of users, and as your payment partner, we witnessed a lot of large-scale preparation before the event. And can you give us a quick glimpse on these preparations?
Yeah, it's we've talked about it in multiple forums. It seems to be the only question I get asked when I get onto these panels. The top line is preparing for failure always. So we obsessively plan for failure. Right, the happy path is the happy path. So our preparations begin well in advance. We do a lot of traffic modeling. So all the usual stuff that you could think of. But largely, I would say the secret sauce is just preparing for failure. And one of the key things is always, I use this line with my team. I'm a big Formula One fan, and I say, every Formula One car is set to travel on a specific circuit. Right? It needs to be tuned for that. So tuning becomes important, right? A lot of times, when I look at engineers tuning, they'll say, okay, look, I'm going to expect so much traffic and I'm just going to throw hardware at it. We've had situations at Hotstar where, our cloud provider comes and says, I've got no more capacity to give you. So we had these fun conversations, right? So it's always been about how frugally you can, absorb the traffic. So that's, I can go on and on, but that's kind of the top line.
Nice, Akash. So Saurabh, talking about mega events, one cannot miss Flipkart Big Weekend Days. With hundreds of orders placed every second, and 6-day sale event, which probably attracts more than 650 million visits, as per what you published last time. And what are the kind of challenges to handle for such large marquee events? What do you guys do? I mean, please help us walk through your playbook so far.
Sure. I think BBB has been our marquee event, and it started pretty much many years back in 2014 or so. And from the very first BBD, I think that set the tone for us. It was massive learning for us, for the entire infra, including compute, storage, networking, application architecture. The biggest learning what we realized during that time was we are not going to do it wrong. We are going to do it wrong in the sense we are going to massively learn through the years. Over the period of time, we will not get it right the very first time. If we have to get it right very first time, then it will take many years to kind of build what we build today. So the evolution of the architecture, I think that's built into the core of it. We continuously evolve our architecture throughout the ecosystem, throughout the massive scale of services which runs into thousands at Flipkart, and work towards that. I think from the other thing what we started doing, we were the very first, probably or only Indian company who set up their own data center. As you know, we pretty much manage set up the entire multi-DC activated setup so that we control end-to-end thoroughly the complete customer experience, and we kind of end up having everything under our control from that perspective. What we have, if you have to ask me what the key success for, I think the BBDs, I'll probably put it to three things. I think one is pure architectural challenges which we have continuously solved for. We have built many common infrastructure components like data store and so on and so forth, which can solve for the specific workloads, and so that we don't have to solve it everywhere and so on and so forth. We have also, as much as possible, try to break, tearing the data, tearing the network, tearing the infrastructure, and giving the right prioritization to the right to the tier one services, tier one data, and so on and so forth. The second key thing, if you ask me, is what even what Akash was calling out is the preparation towards it. It's a full recipe book. The preparation starts right from the word code. We have built a massive automated skills testing suite, which kind of simulate that kind of perform and that kind of a load, and then there is a process set in right throughout the year where we kind of keep validating, benchmarking our services. It is not just at the just at the big event. You can't move a mountain just in so little time. So it is a massive exercise throughout the year. The third thing I would like to put it is probably the cultural part of it. It's pretty much honed into the teams now, that whatever we do today, right from the beginning, with respect to the architecture and the design choices we make, whatever we build on the feature set, that always kept in mind what will happen during the BBD or the big events like that. What kind of failover scenarios are needed to kind of solve for, how it will scale, what is going to be impact on the overall throughput or latencies of the systems, and so on and so forth. What is the minimalistic user experience we need to continue to hold, even if there are failures in other part of the system. So I think those were the learnings, and I think over a period of time we have built on top of that and
it's an interesting list. I mean, it's a huge laundry list. I mean, assuming you must be preparing for months before the big event. I'm assuming. How many months do you start before the event?
So typically, as I said, it's a continuous process. What happens is the learnings from one BBD goes, that has to be solved before the next BBD comes in. So that's a continuous process. The massive scale up or massive preparation starts like pretty much a month and a half before the BBD, where we kind of get into a zone where we kind of slow down on the features first, so that we are not changing the software as many times. We have we have a working copy of the software all the time, which is what the users will see and what we are testing towards. And from that 1.5 months, we work towards. Just give me 1 second. Sorry. And from that 1.5 months, it goes towards preparing for the scale, the redline testing, we call it internally, which is basically redlining, benchmarking each of the key services, and then coming up with the right expectations.
Cool. Thank you so much. Harmeen and Kailash has joined us. Thanks for joining, Harmeen and Kailash. Asking about the same thing, I mean, internet penetration in India has grown almost about 300% over the past 5 years. Harmeen, would love to hear from you. And as an ISP, how you have ramped up your infra to support such scale over a period of time? How have you been doing that?
I think, Raju, I mean, these are, we're large telecom companies. We support 300 million customers. So generally, we always build to have a lot more room, especially as the digital boom has already been happening last few years. Yes, I think the more unique problem that we've had over the last few months, and especially as the country went into lockdown, is the way networks and our sites are capacitized. Is when we are in commercial areas and tech parks and IT hubs and things like that, the sites are capacitized for usage at that point in time, where you have hundreds of thousands of people in those campuses, during the day and accessing all data and information. And then suddenly the usage, as the country went into lockdown, in all those areas went down to zero. And in
Yeah.
houses, which is like a little bit of usage at night, and when Akash puts down some interesting movie and people are watching at night, I mean, that's when you see a bit of a boom. But suddenly, the biggest thing that happened is that all the work time traffic, it moved all to home locations and residential sites, and suddenly they saw a big spurt of data usage. And the house actually became an office, and it remained a house, and it became a theater and a source of entertainment and
Yeah.
everything as well. And then a lot of people, how to kill so many hours a day and nowhere to go and nobody to meet. So, they just all went to Netflix and Hotstar and YouTube, and that was a form of entertainment as well. So I think coping with that was a little interesting, but very, very proud of how well our network infrastructure data center teams coped with that. And I think three important things to call out. One is, most of the country was running towards the safety of home and saying we're going to get quarantined at home. We had almost over 800 people who were our brave soldiers who actually said we're going to get quarantined inside our network data centers and our technology data centers, and they were going in the opposite direction. And I think at the risk of all the health risks that everybody would face, they were constantly out on the roads fixing problems, increasing capacity. I think within a week or 10 days, we kind of got to where we needed to get to of lockdown, and to be able to support the country. And I think the second point worth noting is that Airtel has a very different BCP policy than maybe most companies, because my BCP policy, I ran it in two parts. The first part was what I needed to do to keep the country running. Let's not forget the government news channels. I mean, whether it's we run a DTH business, so carrying live TV traffic to news channels to everything on the mobile, we were the only form of connectivity, as much as not only for us but also for the government. So keeping the country running was kind of the first preference and the first focus. And then second came keep the company running. So it was a very unique situation where you actually got to put the country first, and then came anything about your company. I think the third thing worth calling out is that we had a lot of help as well. I mean, for example, within the first few days, we reached out to all our content and entertainment partners and said, on mobile, let's come down from HD to SD for a large part of the traffic, because otherwise the networks were going to get choked very, very easily, as traffic soared up almost 8-9x across a lot of these platforms. So I think the industry kind of came together, and I was really proud to see as well. I mean, everybody was putting, the whole either industry or country's interests ahead of their own. And it was, I think, a very, not the best way to bring collaboration across various people and verticals, but it worked like a charm. So
awesome. I mean, very nice to hear the background stories, what we're running, when this 20% hike that happened during the COVID time, it must have not been easy to handle such situations.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it took a lot of brave people to do it.
One quick thing, if there's a little echo, if people are not speaking, could you please turn mute? Yeah. Yes, I mean, apart from the streaming of Hotstar and gaming, gaming which is booming a lot of people started trading. People have started trading. I think the growth has been phenomenal. I hear that Zerodha is now the global leader in terms of the number of trades that happen. Almost about 7 million trades a day. That's insane. I mean, like hundreds of thousands of orders in a second. Would love to hear from you, Kailash, in terms of how do you manage the scale? How do you prepare for these things? Of course, I do remember, there were a couple of glitches during the April timeframe. But post which it was like amazingly smooth, and it was quite nice. I mean, would love to hear from you.
Thanks. In fact, I think on our peak days, we've now exceeded 9 million trades on certain days. And I think the issue for us is the unpredictability of these events. You can have 10% traffic for months, and on one fine day, at one fine second, when news breaks out, suddenly you'll get 10x or 100x traffic. So it's for us, scaling is about common sense principles. It all comes down to how we've organized our systems. The systems are really simple. Architecture is as simple as possible. We don't needlessly bring abstractions, because at some point, if something breaks, if you have way too many abstractions in your systems, layers behind layers, it becomes really difficult to take pieces apart and scale them independently. So it's entirely technical. Plus, you have to provision for 2 or 3 or 4x. And by provision, I don't necessarily mean throw more servers or just increase infrastructure capacity and leave it. But you benchmark your services, your applications to perform 2, 3, 4x or whatever the current baseline is. Imagine if it's an HTTP service, for example, we benchmark that it could only be getting, let's say, 2,000 requests per second today, but we make sure that it can handle up to 100,000 requests per second.
Hi everyone. So sorry to interrupt. I've been pushed forward from the technical people just to give one small thought. The people watching see some echo. So if everybody who's not speaking could go on mute, that would be fantastic. Again, sorry for the interruption. And all right.
Yeah, so we make sure that we are over-provisioned in terms of the capability of the software that we write, the services that we write. And as I said, the key is keeping the architecture really, really simple. So there's no microservice hell, there's no monolith, unmovable parts. It's a trade-off between all these things. And you're always expecting a black swan event to happen whenever. So when your mental framework is built as such, the software that you build will automatically start reflecting that sort of capacity. And the other thing is we've kept the way we build software, the way we organize our technology team, we've also kept that really, really lean. And especially because in our industry, there are tons of regulatory changes that happen overnight. Last year, I think there have been at least half a dozen regulations that have completely changed how brokers operate. So if your systems are not agile in terms of scale or business logic, functionality, etc., you can't even cope up. So you have to. The trade-off is between keeping all of these things balanced so that you technically get scale, plus you're also ready to quickly implement whatever the regulator is pushing at you. And another huge headache for us is the legacy infrastructure that underlies the industry. So we can build all the scale that we want in our stack on which we have full control, but we're still connected to the stock exchanges, the depositories, the market institutions via physical lease lines that we pull. Each lease line that takes months to commission. There's a lot of back and forth. There's emails, lost emails. And each of these lease lines have really, really limited capacity. And when we talk about, let's say, our scale of, or Hotstar scale, the scale of an infrastructure institution is orders of magnitude smaller. We are talking about 200 messages per second, 400 messages per second, etc., which is nothing.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to build the system that can handle millions of orders with the rising market demands, on top of something that can only process 200, 400 things. So if a line can only do 400 things a second, you have to lay a dozen lease lines. So you always have to over-provision. And provisioning is not clicking a button. You have to literally, write to the exchanges, apply, wait for months. So it's always a huge pain. And like you said, glitches happen. And a lot of times these things, we pin down to capacity, the underlying capacity issues. And it's quite painful as an engineer, because you can build whatever you want, but if the underlying infra isn't enough to support your unpredictable growth, it's a problem. Yeah. But thankfully, over the last several months, we've had incidents, incidents that lasted a few minutes, thankfully, but I think the industry as a whole was dealt a big blow with the surge in traffic. There were several brokers that were down for days. There were several banks that were down for months. Thankfully, all the engineering that we've been putting in over the last many years paid off.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a constant struggle. Yeah.
Thanks, Kailash. I mean, that's quite informative. I mean, in fact, incidentally, we ran a poll during this question. How mature is capacity planning around planning planned scale events, right? We ran a poll, and interestingly, 42% of the folks were relying on, we add the capacity when we get alerted. From that viewpoint, I feel there's a lot of learning what audience can have from the kind of preparedness what you have. Coming to these unprepared events, right? I mean, I think unprepared events, as Kailash was mentioning, the connectivity to the ecosystem is always flaky, right? It's unpredictable, right? And I'm pretty sure, Saurabh from Flipkart must be facing this. He must be dealing with a whole lot of partner ecosystem in terms of ensuring the payments is up and running throughout the day, right? Would love to hear in terms of how do you deal with these events? How do you build your infrastructure in such a way that it can automatically manage such things?
Sure, I think you hit the nail on the head. Basically, specifically in the payment systems where we are partnering with a number of partners, I think what we have built is a lot more fault-tolerant system at our end. As much as possible, we can pretty much manage the consumer experience at our end by a lot of load shedding we do to control the demand at the partner thing, because we understand the demand which is coming into us, and we understand what kind of a load or the capabilities behind those partner ecosystems are. So we pretty much have built pretty much a very sophisticated rule-based system which kind of manage how much throughput we allow in such spikes. During such spikes to the different partners, how do we distribute the load? How do we kind of go with what kind of throughput we allow to pass on to them? We are also even looking at some of the ML algorithms towards building that so that we can be more efficient in that. Today we are pretty much our reaction time is few seconds. We want to kind of react to those events much earlier and be more predictable about it based on the what we are seeing on the partner side. But yes, it's a massive exercise. We also work closely with a lot of our partners. Not only load testing, as I was talking about the scale testing at Flipkart, but we also work with a lot of our partners to scale test along with them. A lot of partners, some of the partners look forward to those events because they also get that opportunity to validate at a very high throughput and so on and so forth. So I think we have built that massive, we are working with this massive ecosystem to solve for it. Then, as I said, technology always goes with the cultural aspect of it. So we have built we always try to build in the right culture around the root causes with us, with our partners, and looking at all those failure points which can be eliminated and solved for. So within our ecosystems, we have kind of managed to build a lot of automated ways through which we can manage, we can react in case of any failure. So we as I think Kailash was saying, that the systems are built assuming that things will go wrong. And it could be at our end, it could be at partner end. So we kind of build that within the systems as much as possible. And then there are a lot of playbooks which we build where we kind of try to write down all the scenarios, pretty much what can go wrong during eventual scenario, and if that goes wrong, what are our quick steps for recovery and so on and so forth. With well practiced throughout, and like the RTOs are calculated so that we are more predictable about them in if the eventuality comes. And a lot of work works with the product team works a lot more towards identifying what features to pair if things are not working as expected during the unexpected plans. So how do we keep the bare minimum infrastructure, bare bones running from a customer experience point of view? So I think a lot of this goes into a lot of planning right from the beginning, and that now we are trying to kind of put that across in even while we are doing a lot of designing work or the PRD work and so on and so forth. So fault tolerance is built into that, right?
Awesome. Awesome. I mean, again, as Kailash and Saurabh, you guys were telling, we were running a poll. Have you been impacted by any of the recent bank downtimes as a public poll? And about 60% folks says that they've been impacted. So it's not a surprising thing. Akash, coming to you, read in one of your blog posts, you have mentioned about something called code red, right? And you have certain kind of playbooks, and there's some interesting thoughts and philosophies around code red. Would you love to share with the audience?
Sure. Trying to recall when I said code red, mostly from a few good men, but I think Saurabh and Kailash are being humble. I think building systems like this are insane, and black swans are truly black swans. I think one thing that I want to build on what Kailash said, simplicity and keeping removing abstractions. That's he's saying it so simply. I know there's so much of a struggle to make sure, especially when you're preparing for black swans. It's a constant debate in the engineering team that are you over engineering or is this simple enough, right? Like, simplicity is hard, right? A lot of things. I think Saurabh covered it, so I'll stay on the top line. Largely, look, a black swan is something unexpected. You can do whatever you want. You can obsess and all your ML models and traffic patterns. You will still get your behind kicked, right? And what you do then is very critical. So I tell my team that I don't want to be a fire station, and I don't like drama in my life or in my team. So but nevertheless we practice a lot of fire drills. One of the things we started very early on was simply realizing that we needed to know every part of our system. One of the things we've done this year on, we changed our business model to go pay only, and that radically changed a lot of assumptions that we made when we scaled out and planned our architecture, and we had to be nimble about it. Right? One of the key things that we did is that, hey, how do you stay on point? How do you recognize an event before it happens? How do you determine anomalies? And one of the things we're doing with we're doing a lot of telemetry on our traffic patterns to recognize when anomalies can strike us, so that we know before something happens. That being said, you will still get your behind kicked. It's inevitable, right? There is going to be downtime, and how you react to it depends on which business you're in. What's good for Zerodha may not be good for Flipkart, may not be good for Airtel or Hotstar, right? We have very different businesses that we run, and we do a lot of work with our product team to build experiences where we are able to. It's all about shock absorption. So that's one aspect of it. How can you build a product experience that doesn't let the customer suffer, right? So one of the aspects is don't fail publicly, right? Everything would be melting down in the back end, but don't fail publicly. That's one philosophy. And the other one that we really do, and we've learned a lot over the years, is just situation management, right? We spend a lot of time doing drills where we have protocols saying when there is an incident, who's in charge. Like one of the things that I put a lot of premium on, again bearing on my love for Formula One, is I have this concept of a game marshal or an event marshal. The idea is this person is the CEO of the entire event, right? Nothing goes without this person's get-go, right? And it's been invaluable for us because that has laid down simplified decision-making in a big way. Whenever we had a P0 event, it was like everything is going to hell in a handbasket. This person gets in and that person is solely responsible for bringing things on. And I think when this happens, having a lot of clarity of thought on bringing the system back, mitigation number one, right? And essentially dropping noise. What ends up happening is that well-meaning, but you've got everybody in that Zoom call or in that incident room trying to give suggestions on how to do it. And at that point, it's very critical to kind of nail it on the head and make sure that, someone's firing the right bullets. But, some of these strategies have really helped us.
Cool. I mean, when we talk about scale, I mean, we just can't ignore security. I mean, like with more power comes, more responsibility as companies scale, right? There are several guardrails that you need to, you need to build to improve security in the system. I would love to hear Harmeen's thoughts. I mean, with almost 500% raise in security attacks in the past few quarters, providing a secure network becomes an important parameter for the telecom provider like you. How are you solving for infra and security challenges at Airtel? Would love to hear your thoughts. Yeah.
Well, hopefully in a decent manner, because I also run the cybersecurity business for Airtel. So a lot of our customers depend on us as well. But I think, Ajay, I mean, that is one thing that, is something that's definitely taken a lot of both, brain and brawn during this time, because the cyber attacks were all over, and we secure infrastructure for the almost 100% of the top banks in the country, as well as financial services, other financial services, insurance companies across the across the length and breadth of India, and of course over 300 million people of customers of our own, and 1 million enterprises that we support. So all of that piece was very front and center. We work very closely with all the intelligence agencies, and by the nature of telcos normally tend to do that for various reasons, and with the NSA. And I think during this time we definitely saw a lot of things coming together to see what we needed to do to keep all the customers safe, what we needed to do for ourselves as well. Our SOC actually runs heavily on uses a big part of the SOC management is actually done by our AI ML models rather than humans. And I think that really benefited us. Almost 70% of the attacks get mitigated, before a human is even involved. And I think the normal time that it would take for a human to wake up, brush their teeth, or clean their eyes and see the world is open and log into a system, the models have already kind of kicked in, and that's really, really helped us. We invest very heavily in our cybersec, but this is the game where you can't be complacent at all. Look at what's happening around us, and every day there's a news about some leak or the other. So I think all you can do your best is think like a criminal but act like a responsible citizen, and in this race just try and keep up, and you'll be very lucky if you're a little ahead of them, but mostly even if you're not ahead of them, just don't fall behind. So that's all. That's the best you can do, and that's what our philosophy is.
Nice advice. Kailash, on a similar note, right? The year has seen a lot of new things. With oil prices going negative. How have you designed systems that are secure enough, and people don't exploit the system by executing trades that may fall through such grievances, right? So, I mean, there will be quite a few such unknowns. How did you go with designing your system?
The crude price going negative, we didn't even know that was possible. I don't think anybody even knew that was a possibility. So the exchanges here, they had to rewire their systems to even support negative numbers. And when it comes to security, I think there are two things for us. One is risk mitigation and one is cybersecurity. And when I say risk, it's managing the risk of complex financial products. So when people trade derivatives, FNO, the risk can be practically unlimited, and the models, the risk models that the regulators have prescribed, span margins, all these margin computations are really complex, and they keep changing. So there could be one risk rule which could be off in a broker system that could just bankrupt the broker overnight. So that is one thing. That's it's called RMS in the industry, risk management system. So that's one thing. And then you've got the standard cybersecurity stuff, hygiene, exploits, vulnerabilities, etc. And there are people trying to exploit loopholes in risk rules prescribed by the regulators and also technical vulnerabilities. So I don't think there's a formula. Nothing in the world is 100% secure. We just make sure that we are extremely cautious and careful about all of these things. So when a user sends an order in, we have we've introduced checks, sanity checks. It could be something as simple as a string length check or a number sanity check in multiple places, just to be sure. On every hop, there are checks. And internally, we built lots of systems to detect anomalies and numerical anomalies, exploits in these rules. So that is core to any broker. We've done that. And on the cyber security side, again, it's hygiene and common sense principles, right? I think a significant majority of the technical exploits that happen out in the wild are not really zero-day buffer overflows or anything. It's just somebody accidentally clicking the wrong link or phishing or whatever, really simple things.
Yeah.
So we are very cautious about everything that we push. We do extensive code reviews. We do tests. We have penetration testing, internal and external folks who test all our systems. It's also required by the market regulations. So you do the absolute best you can. You're extremely careful, and simple things like there are no password-based logins anywhere within our teams. Everything for developers, we have certificate-based logins. We have VPNs, multiple VPNs. We have proper segregation. We have field-level permissions for non-technical employees, so people only see what they are really supposed to see. Nobody can just look at all data, because that's also a security vulnerability if humans can see lots of data. So we followed these principles everywhere, and we're very cautious, and you just continue being cautious. If you, like you said, if you read about what happened with the Microsoft/SolarWinds hack over the last 3-4 days, it's damning. Apparently, state actors have found their way into nuclear institutions and all in the US. So nobody is ever 100% secure if they're connected to a network. So all you can do is be extremely cautious and follow all sorts of hygiene principles. That's what we do, yeah.
Akash and Saurabh, anything that you want to add beyond what Harmeen?
Yeah, my CISO will give me a hard time if I give out too many details. But look, Harmeen is chuckling on that. But since we're talking about scaling, an interesting aspect of security is also the fraudulent traffic that you don't serve, right? And this is an interesting one for Hotstar for sure, right? We get a lot of people trying to watch for free, and we had a subscription business, and how we tackle that at that scale when you've got millions and millions of people trying to watch at the same time without impacting our legitimate customers. So I have some crazy stories from that where we've had a significant chunk of our traffic where we don't want to even serve that. We've been able to intercept and deal with it. But and that pretty much represents a crazy sustained DDoS, right? So apart from all the really good and pertinent stuff about governance and security, hygiene, and so on that Kailash pointed out, I think one of the things that you have to worry about scaling is that not only are you dealing with a black swan, this can be a black swan. You may not have that many people doing, let's say, legit trades or buying, stuff on Flipkart. You may have people just messing around with your infrastructure, doing nothing meaningful. And how do you detect and safeguard that? I think one of the things we've been trying to figure out is how do we push a lot of, basically trying to deny early, right? And push a lot of that down to the edges, working with telcos and so on. Let that traffic not even come out, because that just eats away the infrastructure for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just bad for the ecosystem, right? It was curious because during IPL we had BBD as well on one of the days, and that caused a bit of a flutter, because they're like, oh, okay, we're having this mass scale event, Flipkart's having this mass scale event. How's it going to play out? Because it was two big events happening concurrently, and especially when you have traffic that's malicious in nature, it's not helping either party to do business, right? So that's a very curious angle if you're thinking about the scaling aspect. This is something that may not be obvious, but your system still need to scale up, because all of that is going to come to origin or hit part of your infrastructure.
Yeah. Let me take a couple of audience questions. Okay. Harmeen, this one is for you. Harmeen, how does capacity planning at national scale works? Right? People want to understand, how you actually prepare at that scale, and how closely is it tied up to the business growth numbers? You plan something, and how closely is it tied to the business growth numbers is a question an audience asked.
So an interesting one for us, I would say. I think from the best way to plan for anything, whether it's a large event or or capacity planning for networks, or even our own digital properties have over 180 million customers now, and as we plan through capacity for those as well, you have to kind of especially on the network, you have to completely de-average it. So you don't actually plan at a national level and then come down. You do the reverse. You plan literally at a side-by-side level, which really means on a kilometer-by-kilometer radius. And then you aggregate and go up from that. And we actually do it we've got hundreds of thousands of sites, and at each site you see what's the capacity, what is the change in capacity over the last few days, how many smartphones are getting sold in that region, how many new phones are lighting up, how the traffic is changing. If a new university comes up, the whole pattern changes in a jiffy, and you have to watch out for all events, but literally in that kilometer by kilometer area. And again, I think because of the scale of Airtel, I mean, a lot of us, everybody in technology loves to talk about AI, ML, and everything that we are doing using that. And I think for any of us who work at the kind of large scale that we do, and we have a lot of us here who do that. That is actually, for me, it's like table stakes. It's bread and butter. And this is where a lot of our, the prediction of where to go, when to go, in what remote part of the village, beyond a point, of course, there's a lot of human assessment that happens, but there is a very big part that is also run by the entire AI engines, because that's where I'll give you an example. One of the projects that we ran a little while ago was how we map India in a way. We took about 55,000 satellite images and went and used computer vision to tag each and one of them, and especially in the rural areas, to say where's vegetation, where's road, where there's a pond, where there is a lake, and where there is just barren land, and so on and so forth. And then we had a few humans kind of adding on top of that to make sure where we got it wrong. And sometimes, there's for a satellite, there's not much difference between a nala and a kacha road. So India is very, very unique, and you can't put a site in the middle of a nala. So you really got to get that part right. And then what our AI engines, etc., do is really see that how we can take all that piece, all that information, and then make the right prediction. And the reason, coming to the second part of your question, the reason that's very important is Airtel covers more than 97% of the physical land mass of the country as well.
Yes.
And that really means that almost any village which has more than 700, 800 people, we would have a coverage there, and 4G coverage there as well. But when you're planning for that, the cost of running the site goes into lakhs a month.
Yeah.
So unless you're able to make that revenue, you would not be able to sustain running that site. So that is why and the difference in planning of that site is basically, a few meters could actually mean whether we can cover 100 more of those 700 people or 100 less. And that could be the difference in profitability as well. So that's the reason why this level of accuracy needs to be really, really high. And the second piece is, when it comes to fiber, it's even more so. I mean, for Google, just to give you an idea that there are a lot of blogs out there about how Airtel is mapping India, even differently and more detailed way than even Google. And the difference is that, let's imagine there's a road that's 10 meters wide and Google gets that wrong by about a meter. The only difference is it might take you a fraction of a millisecond longer as you have to sway your car. But the difference for us is that when I lay the fiber, that 1 meter could actually mean 100 crores more or 100 crores lesser, or actually mean absolutely zero feasibility because I've just hit a water pipe and the city, I've dug the whole road and hit a water pipe and now I can't lay my fiber and I have to dig the road again and get permission again. And then every time we dig the road, we not only lay the fiber, you have to build the road back up. So it's the level of accuracy that's needed for these things is very, very different. And I think there's lots of learnings that we've got over the years on how to kind of get that right. And like I said, mostly we just hope that we get it right more than we get it wrong. But there's a lot of planning and a lot of depth of information and everything that goes between getting all of these things done.
Fantastic. I mean, we generally don't get to hear this part of the story ever otherwise.
Yeah, I really think telcos should make a behind-the-scenes movie and put it on Hotstar. I mean, that could be I and Akash's next project. Yeah.
Let's talk, Harmeen.
So, Kailash, one last question. How does living on a stock brokerage schedule work for a tech startup? How do you make use of opening and closing hours of exchanges? I mean, this is one of the audience questions that is there.
Sorry, I didn't really get that.
How does living on a stock brokerage schedule work for tech startup?
I think we work 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, just like all other tech companies. Yeah. So we happen to be a stockbroking firm with operating hours of 6.5 hours during the day. But that doesn't really affect us. We just work like all other tech teams out there. So
awesome.
Yeah, it's that simple. Yeah, just like any other tech team.
That's awesome to hear. One last question for everyone. What would be your top fintech problem if solved? When you help the next 10x growth for your organization. I mean, of course. We'll be very interested to understand what your fintech problem would be. So we'd love to hear your perspective. Anyone can answer.
I can go first if that's okay.
Sure, please.
It would be really nice to see national level institutional underlying infrastructure improved and brought up to 21st century standards. So be it exchanges, be it anyone, design proper APIs. Don't do systems like they were done 20 years ago in 2020, and maybe have engineers, people who have technical prowess making these decisions and not bureaucrats. So I think the amount of efficiency boost that will give us, the amount of money it will save across industries will be massive. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that time of the year, Kailash. So Santa's listening to you. I'd for Hotstar and especially kind of a B2C play, I'd love to move towards more let's say a risk assessed payout. Say, hey, you're good for the money, we'll figure it out. So something that I'm always a big fan of, not doing something in real time if it doesn't need to be, right? Talking about scaling again, that's how I would like to scale. I'm like, you want to pay me money. I know you're good for the money somehow, and that's the wish for the fintech crowd. And I know there are products like that, but I think just adoption and ease of use, so much has happened. I think in the last 2 years, in fact, it's been incredible to see UPI cannot take wing. I've been blown away. Infrastructure notwithstanding, I know there are tweaks, but I think that's a product done well. But we can just, I'd love to have a space where the customer's not, worried about whether it will happen. While the security part is important, 2-factor, 3-factor, whatever, right? You want to make sure all that is rock solid. How do you, again, hide, let that be behind the curtain? I think tech, one of the aspirations of us engineers should be to, hide that magic behind the curtain, let the customer not be exposed to that much of, what's happening. So,
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. I think, we are almost, we have taken more than 145 time that is there. Now I think there was some great.
Can I just add one thing, Raju, on that, and I'll make it very quick.
Sure,
I think for fintech, I run a bank as well. We have a telecom and we've got a bank, a payments bank as well. But the other piece is, to Akash's point, in fact, one of the things we're trying to do is for our 300, 400 million customers, do credit scores of those to allow companies like his to make a decision saying this guy is kind of good for it. But the more important thing, I think that one fintech dream would be that for every company, and I would say, whether it's Razorpay or a bank or any one of us, the one pledge we should take in the next, the next year is that what we build that has direct impact on our consumers, make it zero failure, make sure it works. And I think that doesn't apply anywhere else more than fintech.
Wow, that's profound. I think, there were some great takeaways from the session for all of us. Thank you for being part of this. Of course, currently India is on the top of, global charts of internet consumption, but still the penetration is still 45%, right? I think most of the current day startups are still working towards, building for not just for India, but for Bharat, right? Hoping that these startups would get an opportunity to hear through this talk and, plan for their scale and be successful. And obviously, the expectation from you guys being the trailblazers in your domain can make it even bigger for Bharat, right? Thank you so much.